Okay. All right. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Happy New Year. Woo, woo, woo. Welcome to the first Trauma Talk Radio live broadcast of 2025. Here with your Freedom Coach, Natasha Miller. And our theme for the month of January is defining trauma. That's what we're talking about all January here on Trauma Talk Radio Live. But before we get into that, just a quick recap about Trauma Talk Radio. It is an unconventional podcast committed to helping people live a freedom from trauma lifestyle, one candid conversation at a time. And there are three components to Trauma Talk Radio. Number one is our interview shorts. And that is just when we're out and about living our life, going to different events, and we interview everyday people about overcoming trauma, and we post those short interviews online. Two is our Dear Freedom Coach component, where you can submit a question, an interview question for me, your Freedom Coach. And we also do clips where I'm answering the interviewing questions that were submitted. And then lastly, we have the live broadcast, which is now on Tuesdays at 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And during the live broadcast, viewers can call in for a candid conversation about trauma. So, Trauma Talk Radio overall is all about conversation, it's about dialogue, it's about us sharing with one another what works and what doesn't work when it comes to the traumas of life. You never know what you may share that can help someone else. So, that is a recap of what Trauma Talk Radio is all about. So, this evening, our topic is exploring educational definitions of trauma. So, for the live broadcast, we start off with some content about the title, the subject matter for that particular broadcast, and then we open the lines for viewers to call in. Okay. All right. So, we're talking about exploring educational trauma definitions. When it comes to education, every school of thought has their own definition of trauma, which is so interesting because even as I go out and speak to different people, all of us have our own definition of trauma based on our life experiences. And the great thing about it is that's okay. It brings various different perspectives to the conversation to help one another overcome it. So, why it is important to define trauma, kick off the conversation regarding trauma this year by defining it, is to help us bridge the gap between our differences and really create a collective experience of freedom from trauma by really taking the time to understand one another's context. It's very important in that conversation. How I define trauma may be different from how you define trauma because, in essence, how you respond to trauma is maybe different from me. And what I perceive to be a traumatic experience may be different than you, and vice versa, because trauma is very subjective. So let's get into a couple of educational trauma definitions that we're going to cover tonight. The first one is financial. And the financial definition of trauma is that trauma is the distress associated with chronic money related stress, lack of resources, or economic abuse. So that is the financial definition of trauma. Next is medical. Trauma is an acute onset of a disrupted physiological system in which the ongoing threat is internal, is in the body, and it may be long term or permanent. So, that is a medical definition of trauma. And lastly, let's look at the psychological Psychology, there you go. Definition of trauma. And psychology is one of the top schools of thoughts regarding trauma that addresses trauma regarding the mental health field. So, per psychology, there you go. Psychology. I don't know why I'm all tongue tied and twisted. Trauma is a deeply distressing or overwhelming experience that can have lasting adverse effects on a person's mental, emotional, and physical well being. It is typically characterized by an intense fear and hopelessness where the experience is perceived as life threatening or overwhelming. B, sudden onset, where the event occurs unexpectedly without warning. And I'm sure each of us has encountered one of those type of traumatic experiences. Like, hold up, wait a minute. Trauma. You did not give me a notification, a heads up, anything when before I turned this corner in my life that you were on the next street. In the next lane. Like, hey, you didn't give me no signs that you was about to show up now and interrupt my life. So sudden onset where the event occurs unexpectedly without warning. C is witnessing or experiencing violence, abuse, or loss. This helps us remember that trauma isn't always something that happens to us directly, but it can be indirect. It can impact us by what we witness occur in the life of someone else, what we may even hear or see on the news report. So trauma has its various ways of impacting us. And then lastly, D, long-term effects is when traumatic experiences can lead to a range of symptoms such as anxiety, depression, nightmares, flashbacks, difficulty regulating emotions, and PTSD, which is post-traumatic stress disorder. So those are all the complexities of trauma per the psychology definition of trauma, and why it is so important that each of us develop a trauma recovery plan. It's vital because in this life, as we're lifing, traumatic experiences are going to occur. So, do we have a trauma recovery plan in place that addresses three vital components? One is proactive slash preventative and proactive. And that is having some tools in place to where when an unexpected trauma occurs, it lessens the impact of that trauma because we're already have some type of care plan in place that keeps us stable and keeps us secure and safe internally amid a traumatic experience that may occur unexpectedly externally. So we want to have something that's proactive and preventative. Two, we want to have a recovery component. What are the things that we actually do and engage in to actually recover from a traumatic experience, to heal and overcome once it's actually occurred, to where we're not living with long-term aftermath effects as outlined, such as anxiety, nightmares, and flashbacks. So the recovery minimizes the aftermath and really helps us to overcome the aftermath in a shorter period of time, as opposed to if we were to deny, suppress the need to engage in recovery. And then the last part is a maintenance component. You know, once we have some preventative, proactive work in place, the recovery component, and now it's gotten us back to a place of being fully healthy. How do we maintain that freedom from trauma, healthy lifestyle that begins within ourselves, mentally, emotionally, spiritually? And so those are the three components that's necessary for an effective trauma recovery plan that helps us live a freedom from trauma lifestyle despite the traumatic experiences that may occur in our lives. So, key things to remember as we close out this topic of exploring educational trauma definitions is that trauma is subjective. What may be considered traumatic for one person may not be for another. And this is why it's important to understand the differences and how we may even define trauma. And then also, the severity and impact of a traumatic experience can vary depending on our age, where we are in our lives emotionally, mentally, physically, and then our support system. If we have a solid support system in place, so those are the three things that can help us leverage and the severity of the impact, lessen it, minimize it. And those are components of that recovery plan as well. So what's the support system? That's number 4. Support system in that. That's number 4. And I'm gonna do a post. So I hope that you all are following me on all social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, here on YouTube and TikTok at Freedom Coach N Miller, because especially with the Instagram and Facebook and stuff, that's where I post the teaching posts, and I'm gonna do one on having a trauma recovery plan with that. And so stay connected. Also visit my website at C as in cat, the number 4, L as in love, global.com for more information about some events that I have coming up. I have a Transforming Grief intensive coming up next month, and it's virtual, it's online. And there's a free ebook on my website that you can download as well. Share about Trauma Talk Radio with your friends and family. Stay tuned for more information to come about my Freedom and Fun Academy, which is going to be my online membership program. That's going to be limited to 40 people. Yes, we got to keep it small and intimate. But if you're just looking for a safe space to navigate the challenges of life and continue your growth and development as a person, as a leader, as a professional in your life, to continue cultivating your intrapersonal intellect and your interpersonal skills, then the Freedom and Fun Academy is for you. So chime in next week for another Trauma Talk Radio live broadcast. Next week, we will engage personal trauma definitions. So we're really going to take some deep dive into personal trauma definitions. And so since there's no one here, I don't see anyone here present for this live broadcast, there is no need to open the lines for viewers to call in, because apparently there's no viewers here for the live broadcast. So this is our first one for the year, and I'm looking forward to viewers coming and chiming in for the live broadcast and our future episodes of Trauma Talk Radio Live. So this is all for now. You all, peace and freedom to you all. Take care. Have an awesome week. Until next time, this is your freedom coach, Natasha Miller, signing off. Bye-bye.